What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have an album review for you. And admittedly, maybe one that's a little bit off the metal reservation, but not entirely off the channel's reservation because I've actually covered this band before. And in terms of this week's bigger releases, I would definitely say that this one was pretty up there. I mean, this band has garnered a lot of hype over the years. And considering how much the last album blew up, I figured that this was kind of an interesting one to go over just to see, how they matched up a pretty successful album. So today I'm going to go over the latest offering from Turnstile, Never Enough. This also comes out on the 6th of June on Roadrunner Records. This band formed in 2010 in Baltimore, Maryland. This is their 4th album overall. Now, admittedly, I have not heard their first 2 albums. I got into them with their big breakthrough success, Glow On, which from what I hear is a big turning point in the band's career. It definitely shifted their sound. This band is firmly rooted in hardcore and punk, but I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on here. There's dream pop, there's pop punk, there's alt rock, melodic hardcore, maybe post-punk. I don't know. There's a lot going on. Baseline, I'd say you could probably compare individual moments on any one of these songs to bands that are pretty well established over the years, but in terms of like comparing this band's overall sound to one band in particular, good fucking luck. Now this does feature a lineup change. This is the first album without founding guitarist Brady Ebert. He left in 2022, and this is the first one with new guitarist Megan Mills. Outside of that, the rest of the Glow On lineup is still very much intact, and I would say so is the sound. This very much feels like a continuation of what they were doing on Glow On, and I mean, rightfully so. That was their big breakout success. They even garnered some Grammy nods. Why the hell wouldn't you follow it up with something that was kind of similar? But I will say that this album maybe reaches a bit farther, maybe a little bit bolder in some categories. There's some material in here where I feel like what was like kind of flirted with on Glow On is fully embraced on here. And it's very apparent from the opening track, the title track, which opens up with a wash of just lush, layered dream pop synths. And synths are a bit bigger on here. Now, synths were still a big part of Glow On, but I feel like that one was a little bit more guitar-centric. Like, you still had a lot of like fun riffs that were like, heavy punk strumming, some good, like, broken down hardcore riffs, a lot of alt rock hooks too. And that's still very much on here, but this really embraces the synths quite a bit more. In fact, this opening track I would describe as a synth sandwich, because in between the big synth lead-in and the big synth outro, there is a good, like, heavy alt rocker with like a solid groove to it, good vocal hooks. Yates, I think, has just this very infectiously catchy voice. It's very tuneful shouting, I guess you could call it. I will say that there's definitely a little bit more in the way of like processing on his vocals, where before, like, there were some moments of auto-tune, but a lot of it was just like kind of like heavy reverb and a lot of like, fun echoed chants and such. Here, there's definitely some more auto-tuned moments and interesting moments where his vocals kind of weave into the synth patterns. But the guy still delivers like some fun hooks, and a lot of it is just like very repetitive. Like, he's essentially like saying the song title a lot and repeating like a lot of the verses overall. Maybe a couple of words change, but when it comes down to his delivery, he just has this fun, infectious sort of like just tunefulness to it. But this opening track, which I believe was the lead-off single, and I think there's even like a companion movie to this album. Pretty ambitious if you ask me, but it's a very interesting setup for an opening track because it kind of comes across as like a weird mishmash between like 311 and Tangerine Dream, which those are 2 bands where I don't think I've ever brought them up in the same sentence before, but here we are. And the first 5 tracks in here, I think, are really solid songs. The title track, Soul, I Care, Dreaming, and Light Design, I think, all stand out for different reasons and showcases a lot of this band's interesting wheelhouse. Soul, Dreaming, and Light Response in particular, I feel like this is like, their sound overall. It's just based on solid guitar riffs, a lot of like just heavy strumming. Like, you don't get a lot of like, palm muted chugs on here. Like, it's not that kind of hardcore. Granted, I would have welcomed it, but I still like this. Like, a lot of this stuff reminds me of, just like kind of a litany of different bands. Again, I brought up 311, H2O, for those that remember those dudes. I think they're still around. Quicksand, Deftones, early Incubus. It's not heavy in terms of like a visceral sense, but it's just got a good punch to the guitars. The guitars have a great sound overall. It's just got like a like a heavier punk rock sort of sound overall. Like, I mean, a lot of stuff that I used to listen to on Epitaph Records back in the day. Like, it's just got a good kind of skate punk tone, I guess. But the songs are rhythmically fun. You get a lot of fun grooves. Dreaming brings in reggaeton beats over broken down punk riffs. There's extra percussion on it. It's fun. It's very summery. Like, I don't know. It just sounds like a good party song, but it's still got like some angsty punk energy. Yates kind of switches it up from like his tuneful bellows to like a more shouted, slightly more aggressive delivery. You get a little bit of that reggaeton laid in on Soul as well, but that one kind of just goes into like a more straight up like punky D beat. And I do like when this band kind of gets like, a little bit more like attached to that old school like punk sound. Like there's some good D beat rager moments on here. Birds and Sun Shower in particular, like those two songs with their more aggressive, more just kind of like in your face appeal. It kind of reminds me again of like a lot of bands I used to listen to on like Epitaph Records, like Pennywise. I'm still a big Pennywise fan. And Straight Faced, especially in the more aggressive sections on here. But with this band, it's all about the blend of all these elements and how they kind of like switch them around in transitions. And some of them really work. Like I kind of like this like strange blend of like 80s synth pop and again, like reggaeton beats and punk riffs and like hardcore energy. Sometimes it really works. Again, Dreaming, I think, is an absolutely fantastic song. Like, it kind of sounds like a combination of like Miami Sound Machine and Shelter. Again, another two bands I never thought I would bring up in the same sentence. But then you have songs that blend in like lush 80s pop rock, and they do an exceedingly good job with those. Seeing Stars and I Care. You have these shimmering, bright, clean guitars, instantly reminding me of bands like The Police, The Cure, The Clash, maybe a little bit of the Romantics too, all of which begin with the. I didn't even think about that until I looked at my notes. But yeah, they're bright, they're poppy, good solid grooves. The Police vibes in particular, I feel like are all over here. The little electronic drum flourishes that are on I Care, like you just get this little accent that kind of comes in this just very Stuart Copeland-esque sort of beat. I love those little like 80s nods that pop up that are like a little bit more subtle, but I also like the fact that, again, they still bring in a little bit of that punk energy, like the chorus on that song, while the verses are, bright and shimmering, love those big chimey guitars. They bring in heavier guitars on the chorus to kind of give it like a little bit more oomph, but it stays very like light and airy and catchy. Seeing Stars in particular, like that one is just a straight up like 80s pop rock song. And that one, once again, huge Police vibes. Love the broken down bass line. It's a little bit more straightforward, simple, 4/4 time rhythm. I really enjoyed the vocals on that one too. It just has a very like warm, pleasant, inviting sort of vibe, like a day at the beach, except you're on like, I don't know, your fourth tequila sunrise. Been there. And in terms of just like a good flat out rocker of a song, Slow Dive in particular, I would say is a huge stand on here. It's probably the most guitar centric song on here, whereas like the entire song is very rooted around big riffs. It's just got that good heavy, like, I don't know, I would call it almost like an early Incubus sort of like heavy riff to it, where it's kind of still very much in the rock arena, but it's got like a little bit of extra punch. They do break it down a little bit. It's catchy, it's fun, it's got a little bit of like additional heaviness to it that I kind of liked. Again, not like a full-on metal heavy. I wouldn't say anything on here is a full-on metal heavy because I wouldn't say this band's a metal band, but I also feel like this band would be really interesting to bring up in heavy but not metal. Anyway, a lot of this I really enjoyed. I feel like they kind of doubled down on the ambition that they had on Glow On to kind of like, push this into like a different arena or, flat out pretty original sound, because again, I can't think of a band that sounds flat out like Turnstile right now. But as I was listening to this, there's definitely some issues I have in this. While I would say it is more ambitious in spots and maybe kind of like coasts on the ambition of the previous album, I do feel like some of these songs kind of wander. And occasionally some of these songs just feel kind of incomplete. Now with Glow On, a lot of the songs are short. I think there's maybe like 2 or 3 songs in there that are over the 3-minute mark. But for the most part, they sounded very complete. They had a good beginning, good end. The middle was fun. There was a little bit of like, additional melody on the bridge. And most of the songs in here do that. But there's also some songs in here that feel, I don't know, just like kind of oddly put together. And again, sometimes just a little incomplete. In terms of being oddly put together, dull was one that kind of struck me as, well, not dull. Like, I wouldn't call it dull. It's just kind of weird. It starts off with, some isolated vocals and, guitar line behind it. Kind of sets the song up, and then it breaks into the hardcore bounce that is the chorus on there. It's catchy, it's fun. And then in the background, I start hearing all this, like, electronic chatter, like stuff that would be in the background of, I would say, like, Radiohead's Kid A. And then that kind of like curtailed into the next verse, and then you get the big bouncy chorus again. And then the whole end of the song is essentially those Kid A kind of like skittering, staticky noises where things are kind of like glitchy sounding. And it never felt like it kind of like capitalized on any momentum there. Like, the chorus definitely begged to be repeated. Like, it was a good hook on there. But instead, it kind of petered off into atmospheric nothingness. And that was kind of the same thing with Look Out For Me, which I was really excited to get to when I saw it was a track over 6 minutes long. That, at least as far as I've listened to with this band, is kind of unheard of. And for the first half of the song, it really makes use of these like good dynamics, like, the switches between the verses and the chorus I thought were really good. Great melodies. It had like an urgency. It was punchy. It was melodic. It kind of did everything that this band does really well in one song, or at least part of it. Because around like, I don't know, like the last third of the song, it kind of drops out into the synthy passage, which I thought was going to be like just a transition. Like, they were going to bookend that chorus or bring back another verse or something like that, or kind of build on it. But no, it kind of just leans on these droning synths. You get some samples, or it might be like some spoken word in there. And then you hear this techno rhythm kind of coming behind it. And then all of a sudden you're in this tribal techno sort of rave bit at the end. I don't know what happened there, because it really doesn't cap off the song. In fact, it sounds like the start of a completely different song. In fact, I would say like the whole core of that song kind of just wandered off to a different stage at Coachella. Kind of does the same thing on Sunshower too, which I really enjoy the front half of that song. It's a punk rager. It's got all sorts of fucking fun energy on it. It's riffy. It sounds like it's, delightfully destroying the venue it's at, or house party, whatever. But then it just drops out to like an ambient passage. There's flutes on it. And there are a lot of guest musicians on here. So many that I did not bother writing them all down, but there's a ton. But again, I thought this was just going to be like a transitional part, and we get back to like, the rage, the fun. And that didn't happen. The song kind of just petered out. And that is definitely an issue here, where some of the transitions in these songs kind of like derail the energy. And energy, I feel like, is what this band is all about. Like, when this band is on it, like, the energy is fun. It's uplifting. It's vibrant. Yeah, it's not metal heavy, but it's got a fun intensity to it. And these transitions where they kind of just drop out everything in favor of, again, these like ambient swells of synths and, just like lush atmosphere, it really takes away from what I feel, again, this band is all about. On Glow On, I didn't feel like they kind of like overdid that. A lot of the songs, again, were short, and, if you had a more ambient track, don't worry, the next track would probably be a little bit different, maybe a little bit faster, a little bit more aggressive. Here, I feel like they just fell in love with the synths and the ambience. Either that, or they fell asleep on all of their keyboards and just, kept record on. And while sometimes I think it's good, like, I like the synth tones on here, it sounds really nice, but there's a bit of like an identity crisis on here, where I feel like this band can't decide if it wants to play, Coachella, or like a house party where they can destroy furniture and shit. Maybe they dissected kind of what they did on the last album and wanted to exemplify the elements that they, thought people were really getting into and thought were like really appealing. And I mean, for the most part, I think they did an all right job. But again, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that could be just trimmed out just because it's there, almost like as like a decoration rather than something that, is musically substantial. To this band's credit, I think they've done a good job finding, a balance between something like youthful and energetic, but also kind of retroactive in a way too, because this reminds me again of a ton of things that I grew up on. But I don't think everything on here quite works. And I mean, again, breakout albums are kind of hard to follow. But overall, I'm still going to give this 3.5 stars, because the songs that I really enjoyed, which that was most of this album, I just dug. Like, they are flat out catchy, they're fun, they're energetic, they're creative. When this band is on, they're on. But when they're off, they kind of wander off in all directions and, you know, again, fall asleep on their keyboards. While I like that this band is like pushing their sound forward and really kind of like creating their own identity for this band, because again, this band doesn't really sound like anyone that I can think of. It sounds like 100 different bands I can think of. I do feel like they kind of overdid it in some aspects here, and I feel like this could have been trimmed down a little bit in terms of, you know, songs, or just like some songs that maybe just needed a little bit more time and not like just an ambient outro into the next song. Still, overall, I mean, if you're a big fan of, God, man, again, like Pennywise, 311, Quicksand, H2O, honestly, might be like the biggest comparison. There's something about these two bands that I feel is very comparable, even though, again, like H2O wasn't known for like synths and dream pop, but like the hardcore, like melodic aspects about it really remind me a lot of H2O. And even stuff like, you know, The Clash and fucking Incubus and shit like that. Kind of all that wrapped into one. Check it out. I know there's like a tremendous amount of hype around this band. I do think that they partially delivered here, but yeah, form your own opinions. Who knows, you might really dig it. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They're only 99 cents, and our lone perk is doing a members-only live stream, which we will probably be doing one later this month now that we have done our Maryland Death Fest recap, which was a lot of fun. Anyway, membership's the main way to support the channel now. We also still have our store, thrallsmetal.com, with our t-shirts and hats. That is linked down below. And, of course, there's a join button down there if you'd like to join up and hang out with us in a goofy-ass live stream, which, I mean, that's every live stream we do, because we always end up talking about something stupid. But the members one, I don't know, those tend to get even more stupid. And of course, thank you guys so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that stuff. Tons of content coming in the future. We're getting closer to shooting the At the Gates ranking, and we, again, are doing more of the greatest hits thing because we thought that was a lot of fun. And of course, more of the usual stuff too. But yeah, you guys absolutely rule. Thank you so much for all your support. Again, I want to reiterate the fact that all of the killer people that we met in Maryland for MDF, thank you for coming up to us and shaking our hands. That meant a lot. It just blows my mind away that we have as many fans as we do. And so far, like, all of them have been just so fucking awesome. So thank you all once again, and we will catch you later.